Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 346 of the Assorted Calibers Podcast. The segment of the podcast is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me tonight, of course, I have the greatest hostess in the entire universe, Aaron Paulette. How you doing, Aaron?
I am doing okay. I have a new piece of furniture, but getting into it really doesn't suit this episode. So next week, we'll tell you all about it.
Ooh, a teaser. I like that. And I note that I have to note now that even though I did the standard intro, I have to say that this is an ACP roundtable. So we have, at least for the time being, Oddball.
Hey.
And Oddball is on call, so he might vanish.
Well, you know, on call and tornado watch, so.
Yeah. We have also under extreme weather watch, David.
Yes, I spent a little over an hour in the dark at work today. And then right as the owner said, yeah, power's not coming back, let's just put everything as close to closed up as we can and leave. And we were almost done, and the power came back on. And it was still 40 minutes before official close time. So he was like, I can't afford to just close up anyway. We can't afford to turn away the customers, so we stayed. And then the software that does the drawer reconciliation at the end of the night wouldn't load, and I'm the closest thing they have to an IT guy, pity them, had to figure out why that was, found out that there was a computer in the gun room that was the server for that software, and did not have a UPS on almost anything. The cash register is the only thing on a UPS. Oh, I'm sorry, and the security system. So, but yeah. The server that runs their point of sale software, not on a UPS. So once I got that started, everything was fine, but I got to stay at work a half hour later instead of leaving 40 minutes early.
So the owner's going to buy an UPS, right? That seems like something that
This is
needs
now
addressing.
my mission.
Hmm?
This is now my mission to make sure that happens.
Okay.
Even if it's just
Honestly,
for that server.
I'd point him to one of those battery packs and do one of those, because most of them act as a UPS and will stay up way longer.
If you have a reference to a particular model or brand that you recommend, please toss it in
Echo
chat.
or EcoFlow or Anchor are both solid models.
The problem is, by the time Weer'd finishes introducing people, I'm not going to remember that.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show note.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Right, you just throw a good one in chat, and it'll find its way into show notes.
I mean, if he throws it in chat, I'll just open it up.
Or yeah, throw it in chat. That's true. But yeah, the that was I haven't introduced you yet, but that we are joined by special guests for reasons that will be extremely apparent in just a few moments. Matt and Heinrich from Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns. So hi, Matt.
hello.
And Heinrich.
Hello.
And so, yeah, actually, does we can get right into it, or does anybody else have any non 2A related stories to tell before we get started?
Well, I've got something that's sort of 2A related.
2A adjacent.
What did you do?
I got I got a bag for my Mossberg nightstick.
Ooh. Oh.
Does it double as a back scabbard?
No, it's a backpack, but I got a.
That looks like almost like a guitar bag.
Yeah, it's very much not tactical, which I like.
Yeah,
I was unaware that it weighs like 10 pounds unloaded.
Oh my!
I mean, more like 5, but still.
What color did you get?
It up. It was just the. What was that, David?
What color did you get?
I got black.
Goes with every outfit.
Yep.
I mean, it's not super.
It very much reminds me of the bag that the 1022 takedown models come with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's not
Aaron,
super.
Oh, this thing's way bigger than that.
It is way bigger than that, but
Oh yeah.
Okay, we need to stop stepping on Erin so she can get out what she wants to say.
It's not super duper tactical, at least on the outside, but for people who know what to look like, they're going to clock it because, when it comes in, coyote poop and multicam and olive drab and things like that, it looks like there's something interesting going on there.
Oh, yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I went with black.
The gray would be less tactical, but would show dirt very quickly.
Yeah. And, me living in the area that I live in, people see rectangular bags and they tend to think musical instruments.
Yep. I like the inside layout, too.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't have all of those pouches, etc. It just comes with a couple straps, but it has all of the Molly webbing in it.
Molly and Velcro, yeah. That's mostly what I was... Well, that's Molly and Velcro, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good combination. More companies should do Molly Velcro.
And it has a almost but not quite a shotgun in it.
Correct. Legally, this is not a shotgun.
Legally, it's not a pistol.
Which is like the hardest thing for me to say, because I want to be accurate. And legally, it is not a shotgun, because if it was legally a shotgun, it would not be legal.
Right.
And or at least it would require a tax stamp. But then at the same time, it's a smoothbore item. It is based off of a Mossberg 590, and it takes shotgun shells. It's one of those let's not faff about. The Taurus Judge is also a shotgun.
It also came with a copy of the ATF letter explaining what the hell it is.
Yes,
and what it's not.
Amusingly, the letter intimated that if I were to wear a trench coat and stick it inside the trench coat, it may become an AOW.
Wait,
because one of the reasons is that it's too long to be considered concealable.
Unless you conceal it.
But if I concealed it, then clearly it is concealable.
So I just posted a link to a hard case, also made by Savior, and it's shaped like a guitar, but it has the padding of a gun case.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, what would be even more awesome is, remember at NRA annual meeting, the interlocking foam plug liner?
Mm-hmm.
If they made that for that style of case.
I mean, you can.
Wait, are you talking the Magpul thing?
No, not the Magpul. I forget the name of the company. Anybody?
I'd have to look through my stack of stuff.
Hire something.
But
what was that?
I have an entire bag full of notes on that.
That's what I am currently digging through.
Okay.
Unfortunately, my notes are upstairs.
I listened to that this morning on Handgun Radio.
Oh, that's actually that's a better choice, because I just realized. Oh yes, we the Assorted Calibers pod. Go to assortedcalibers.com and read the show notes for the past shows.
Yep.
ILAR cases.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
I need.
Super
to buy
cool people too.
I need to order some of their stuff.
Listen,
I took a look, and none of my small Pelican cases are the same dimensions as their prepackaged inserts, sadly.
But in theory, if you buy a larger than what you need one, you can just take them apart and squish them in there, because that's the whole point.
It's got the outer trim that everything interlocks into.
But if you remove enough that it's slightly bigger, the whole point of those little tessellations is the little arms can be squished in. So it's
but I'd like to have, just for tidiness, I would like to have the outer. But yeah, you're right.
I mean, I think it actually would be surprisingly tidy, but also at the same time, then you go then break out your get a bigger one and break out your X-Acto knife.
Yeah, you could trim the outer layer of them.
Yeah, but then they would damage them.
Interesting. Two of these look like copies of the Harbor Freight cheap boxes.
Those
Yeah.
are absolutely
Yes.
the Harbor Freight boxes.
Yeah.
Yes, they mentioned that when we were there. And I do need to get a rifle hard case for my AR-10.
Yeah,
So I
thank
might
you for
just
mentioning these. I've got a case that I need to reline, and looks like the stuff to do it with.
Yeah, and I might look into. I just need to take the measurements, but I might get. I think the 48-inch rifle case would work, but I have to double check the measurements. And they've got the 48-inch tactical roller rifle hard case for $199.
That's honestly not a terrible price.
No, for the
Mhm.
case and the foam, and their cases are, I would say, on par with basic Pelican cases. Maybe not quite as rugged, but on par.
Good enough.
Yeah.
All right, but I'm champing at the bit. I'm excited. I needed to have Matt and Heinrich on because I'll just start it off as a narrative lead here. Is that a couple of days ago, Matt posted a video in the ACP chat of you holding a SIG P320 and giving it a gentle jiggle, and you could hear the striker drop. And you said, "I think we found it." And at the time of this, and you could go to the show notes, or you could just search LFD Research. The video is live. You guys pretty much, I think, have found a way that a SIG P320 can go off uncommanded, which, as far as I know, has anybody else done this?
I think we were the first to do that on video.
Yeah, at least publicly.
Like, other people have put a bunch of this together, and we were the first ones to manage to get the right series of parts to make it happen in real life.
Which is crazy because there has been at least one other guy who has a lot of the same stuff, tried doing the same config we did, and did not get the same results, which is terrifying when you realize that.
Yeah, the tolerance stacking from gun to gun is enough that his wouldn't do the shake and drop, but he found other problems on it that are kind of concerning.
So, just in
Yeah.
case we have listeners who haven't yet seen the video, can you briefly summarize your experiment and conclusions?
Okay. The long and short of it is we had 5 different P320s, some of them going all the way back to 2014, and no 2 of them are the same. 2 of them that were made 3 months apart are close enough, but one is a 10 millimeter, the other one's a 9. But
Before you get
we
any
have
further, Oddball, what is the part of this that makes you the angriest?
What?
I don't know.
The part number.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, definitely the part number.
What?
People need to be smacked.
With a brick in the head.
Mhm.
Yeah, the one her safety transfer bar component had the exact same part number stamped on it for the 9mm and 40 caliber version, and also the 10mm and 45 caliber version. They
And
are not the same
dimensionally-
part.
Yeah, I was going to say, as dimensionally, how close are they?
Except
it looks like the
except
10
for one
millimeter.
Yeah, there's one spot that they differ. It's the same part, except for where there's a ledge that comes back into the magazine well, so that you have to drop the magazine before you can flip the takedown lever, and you can't insert a magazine if the takedown safety is still active. And on the 10 millimeter, they had to cut about 100 thou off of that ledge so that the 10 millimeter magazine would slide into the 10 millimeter fire control group. But if you don't flip the fire control group upside down and look at where it looks like they added a cut, or they may have modified the MIM part from the beginning, but it still had the same impression number on it. Like where the first version P320 that I got way back when they first came out had an actual PN and then the digits stamped. And then through the various versions, that part number has changed, but 2 of the parts were very much not the same part, but had the same part number stamped on them.
So the root of the story here, as I see it, is that you've got the 2 different fire control groups. They both have the same part number, and because this is a SIG pistol, the fire control group is interchangeable, and so you could accidentally put a 10mm/45 FCG into a 9mm or 10mm lower, and that's where the problem starts.
Yeah, you can. The 10mm fire control group can go into a 10mm, a 45, a 9mm, or a 40 cal grip with that upper and magazine and appear to function correctly.
And even the transfer bar can be interchanged between the 2 versions.
Yeah.
Of the gun. So you can have the black version, that's the 1045 in the picture. The silver version is the 9mm. Well, that's 940-357. But you could put the part across both of them.
Yeah.
And that's really the only main difference between the larger frame guns and the smaller frame guns. It's all the same fire control group. It's this safety bar is the differential.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that changed over time. Is there a way to tell, like, from the serial number, which generation your gun should fall into?
Nothing that's
no one has any clue.
Nothing that's been published that has been made public.
Yeah. See, I knew the answer to that question before I asked it, which is honestly why I asked it, because that's a really important detail.
Yeah,
it's if, like, for example, Ruger did a recall on one of their firearms not that long ago and said, if it's between serial number X and Y. Smith & Wesson, when they had the problem with the early easy hammer shearing, if it's between serial number X and Y. SIG?
Yeah. It's like I've gone and checked various of my Ruger guns when they've done recalls and like,
oh yeah,
are you in this serial range and don't have this proof stamp on it? And I went and checked. And it's like, oh, I'm outside that range and I have that proof stamp, so I know I'm good.
Yeah.
And
it's
this one,
like with several manufacturers, they'll add a letter stamp, for example. I know that Beretta did that with the F to the FS. Is that right?
Yeah, and previously, like, there's the 84 BB.
Right, yeah. So they add a letter code to it to let you know that it's after certain updates.
Mm-hmm.
Smith & Wesson does it with the dash for the numbers.
Yeah, take a look at that picture and scroll in on the SEER section of the fire control groups.
Which... Oh, the four
most
side
recent
by side
one.
By side? Okay.
Yep. The far right side of that is a 2014 production, moving forward through time all the way up to a 2022 production. And you'll notice just in the SEER interaction area, there are at least 3 different variants.
Yeah.
No.
There are a ton of minor running changes without really any documentation of what was going on.
No,
if you look at the slide stop lever,
I'm still on the SEER. I haven't left the SEER.
The one they publicized was the voluntary upgrade when they added the disconnector and a cut in the underneath the slide.
But if you look at the length of the step on the SEER, that's no.
Yeah. Well, they do have one announced change. The 2 on the right are pre-voluntary upgrade. The 2 on the left are after the voluntary upgrade for the 2 heavy trigger shoe and can fire if it has a sharp impact on the back.
Right, that was the drop safety improvement.
Yes, yeah,
and the one that everyone was able to imitate. So everyone could.
Yeah, the drop The drop safe issue was easily replicated, and they took care of that fairly quickly.
Yeah. That was big enough and famous enough that they actually did fix it. So maybe now that people know what to do to replicate this problem, they might address it.
Which that is another one of the rolling changes. So if you look at the front of the magazine well, you'll see a little silver piece and a open hole on 3 of the 4 frames.
And then the notch on the first one.
The first one does not lock at all. So the first one is probably the safest of the design.
Yeah, the first one does not have any of the problems that we found that can cause the sear to be loosely held back. So let's jump in and say exactly what we observed. So when you take apart the SIG 320, one of the safety features that they made a big deal about back when it was first announced was that you didn't have to pull the trigger to disassemble it. The way they accomplished that is that you would drop the magazine, lock the slide back, and then you would turn down the takedown lever. That pushes a takedown safety bar back on the left side of the frame, or left side of the fire control group. That has a little step that protrudes into the magazine well, so you can't disassemble it if there's a magazine in the gun, and you can't reassemble it if that safety bar is still locked back. Pushing that safety bar back lowers the sear in the fire control group so that the striker will slide past it when you drop the slide stop lever and take the slide off.
Just for those that aren't as mechanically inclined, this is the reason why, say, on your Glocks, you have to pull the trigger to get through, because essentially you lock the slide back, you pull down the takedown lever, so everything's released except for the sear is going to be holding the slide in place. So the moment you pull the trigger, everything goes forward.
Right. Yep. Same with the Weiss Smith & Wesson, and the M&P has that internal lever.
Yep. Which is a cool. It's lame in the fact that you need something to flip it. You can't just do it with your bare hands. There is the tool that exists within the butt of the M&Ps. But
I use my pinky nail on it regularly.
Okay, yeah, I haven't tried too much. I just pull the trigger.
The most important part of that process is making sure that you're putting upward pressure on the slide lock while you stick your finger in the ejection port.
Oh yes.
Okay.
You can get Garand pinky, but but the cool thing about that is that you do need a tool or a slender pinky finger to flip the switch down, but to put it back up, you just insert a magazine. So loading the gun automatically puts it in the firing condition.
Yeah. So yeah, that's one of those things on this that it can. One of the places where a problem can occur, because from the first version to sometime in the first, it's like the one very far on the right in this picture, I bought immediately on the 320 being introduced, because I really liked the 250 and I had lots of 250 parts and magazines and stuff, so I was all on board for this new 320.
Let's interrupt real quick on the talk about what the 250 was, because unfortunately it's not being made anymore, and how similar it is to the 320.
So the 250 is not quite the 320's older brother. It'd be kind of a half brother or a father, but
I'd go father.
It'd be father.
Or uncle.
Yeah, but because of the European regulations on being able to own N number of handguns, SIG came out with a cool modular handgun that was a stamped sheet metal fire control group that you stuck into a plastic grip that was not a serialized part and put on an upper that was not a serialized part, so you could have all the different calibers and sizes that you wanted, but it was technically one gun on your firearm registry for, I believe it was Germany, but I think a lot of other
one of them countries, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the countries. A lot of Europe is like that. And that was a hammer-fired gun. There's a double-action only hammer-fired, which is really nice. It has like a 6 to 8 pound double-action hammer that's very, very smooth, and like it's a very, very nice trigger, very nice shooting gun. I liked it a lot. If I wasn't having to go through and design a whole several parts and a major modification to the slide to put an optic on it, I would probably still be using one of them. But the SIG had all of this legacy parts, like frames and slide forgings and some of the sheet metal parts and the grip module molds that they wanted to reuse. So they took the idea of this modular fire control group that could be swapped from frame to grip to grip to grip with different uppers on it, and they figured out how to put a striker-fired gun into it. And that was the 320. And part of when they were going through that design, they looked and like, well, what are the things that people don't really like about striker-fired guns? One of them is that you have to pull the trigger when you're taking it apart, and you had Glock hand. So we'll be clever, and we'll make it so that you have to lock the gun open, drop the magazine, and then when you flip the takedown lever, you can't have a magazine in it, and you don't have to pull the trigger. And part of that process to take it apart, the sear raises and lowers in the frame, or in the fire control group. And on the very first model, they had it so that when you pulled the fire control group out, you pulled the takedown pin out of the frame, pulled the fire control group out of the frame, that safety bar that slides back to lower the sear and make sure you remove the magazine before you started all of this would pop back forward under spring pressure and reset the sear to where it's supposed to be. And apparently people didn't like that, thought it made it hard to reassemble the gun. I noticed it, but it being mechanically inclined, I figured out how to get the gun back together without too much trouble fairly quickly, and didn't pay much attention to it anymore. But somewhere between that 2014 gun and the next one I got in 2016, enough people must have complained about reassembling it that they added a little notch on the takedown or the slide stop lever, and on a little peg on that magazine or that takedown safety bar, so the safety bar would lock rearward in the disassembled or in the takedown position, which locks the sear in the lowered position to make the takedown or that takedown pin easier to put back into the frame when you put the gun back together. And if this thing is locked back on, or so depending on how your tolerances stack up, the sear could possibly catch the striker, and that may or may not be a problem.
We should add that the 2016 version of the gun that we have, the first one that actually has that lock open safety, the sear still drops further than any frame we have post the voluntary upgrade. Those sears are not dropping near as far as they did in the original two models.
Yep. And that's the next point, is the 2014 and 2016 are before the voluntary upgrade. Part of that voluntary upgrade, SIG added a disconnector to the trigger, or the trigger transfer bar, to disconnect it from the sear when the slide's not in battery. And something with adding that disconnector the sear does not drop down as far as it did in the first two versions that I've got.
So if I could, for, again, our listeners who are not as mechanically inclined, can you clarify for them what issue that sear drop distance would apply to in this process?
So if that sear, so in the first two versions before the voluntary upgrade, the sear drops far enough down in the fire control frame that the striker in the slide slides right past it, cannot catch it in any of the examples we've got. But in the 3 that we had that were made after the voluntary upgrade that have that disconnector, the sear does not drop as far down into the fire control group, and on some of them, sometimes that sear will be high enough that it can catch the striker as the slides forward.
Even though it's in the disassembly position.
Yes. It's in the disassembly position, and it's locked in the disassembly position, but the striker catches on the sear, but not well enough to be positively retained, like if everything was in the proper operating condition.
And it might be the key point that I think we're getting at here is the striker will be held tenuously enough that while it's being held gentle enough that a certain amount of jiggling to it could get it to slip off. So you trying to run a slide forward as you're taking the gun down probably will apply enough force to it. And what your testing did, and you did a very, very good job at demonstrating that, is that it can indeed be jiggled off of the sear, which is very, very, very consistent with the... So I'll step back and say, in SIG's defense, there are probably a dozen or two videos of SIG 320s going off in conditions where they were not intended to. Not all of these can I say with any bit of confidence that was SIG's fault. It could have been either negligent handling. It could have been, there's been several that have been at hot shooting ranges. So it could have been a piece of brass that went into the holster. It could be another piece of equipment in the holster, could be a finger in the holster, any other reasons why. I mean, Glock leg is a thing, I shot myself in the leg holstering my Glock.
I'm the only one professional enough.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I literally was pointing the gun at my leg and pulled the trigger. He wasn't even holstering it, but just there's been a number of instances, and any sort of firearms trainer or video on firearms training will talk about the dangers of reholstering a gun and how you need to do it very, very deliberately and very, very cautiously. And so, but that being said, like one of the best ones is the body cam of the police officer hopping out of his car. And I believe he actually took a round in the leg for that one. And another one where it's the police officers are wrestling with a combative suspect and the gun discharges in the holster. All of those have been, a lot of G-forces are being applied to the gun. Either they're wrestling, hopping out of a car, and various things. So that would be very consistent with a jostle.
Just one thing to interject here. One of the videos, or at least one of the videos where they were tussling with the suspect, the tussle has ended and the officer is walking away when his sidearm discharges.
Yeah.
So the jostling had ended.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was walking and he did do a bunch of jostling, so it's one of those.
But the jostling, the energetic jostling was over for several steps before it went off. So
that is, to me, that would indicate the striker block safety was either non-functional or one of the sticky ones. There's somebody with a video on YouTube of one where it can get depressed and then stay depressed until the striker does a full cycle.
Mhm.
So if the spring was
when
broken
you say it
in
does a
that
full cycle-
jostling,
Sorry.
so if, say, the spring was not installed, that would return the striker block safety to its proper position. So if that spring was either missing or broken or just or it was one of the models where all of that's there, but it's sticky in its movement and it'll stick in a position, that jostling could have jostled that up towards what would be the top of the gun, but in a holster that's either forward, maybe down, and then that is the only thing that would be preventing the gun from going off if it jostled off the sear. So if the striker falls off the sear, you have the striker block safety that should prevent it. But some of them have issues or could have issues. Heck, his could have even been broken.
Mm-hmm. There was the video that came out today where if the takedown or if that takedown safety bar is locked back and you push down on the sear, the lever in the fire control group that raises up to deactivate the striker block safety can move when you're not pulling the trigger. So like there's things going on inside the fire control group that we haven't quite figured out yet. And like if the that takedown lever or that takedown safety bar is locked back, it can deactivate several safeties in the gun apparently and put a few things into unsafe conditions. And if you there was allegations that the 10mm version of that bar was mistakenly installed in some 9mm and 40 caliber fire control groups. And if you have that 10mm bar in a 9mm gun, the magazine or 9mm magazine will slide into place when that takedown safety bar is locked rearward.
And may I interject real quick? We mentioned Oddball mentioned getting mad that they're under the same part number. This part that you're talking about that may or may not have been installed. Do you have any documentations of that actually happening? Of somebody opening up a gun that they bought new?
No.
Yeah.
It's a focus trip had a anonymous tip or a confidential tipper that had told him that the 10mm version had been installed mistakenly put into 9mm bins at the factory, I guess. That's what I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And actually,
but some of their other information doesn't match up with what we found either.
Yeah.
Do you guys by chance know, because this is just something that popped into my head, do you by chance know if any of the M17 or M18 guns had the larger frame takedown safety?
I don't know.
Well, and
unfortunately,
also,
we don't have any specific sources. We just have what guns we are working on, and we're paying attention to the discussion.
I sent a link to your video from to Tim from Military Arms Channel, because I know he has a few M17. He has at least a few M17s. I don't know if he has an M18 or not, but he at least has a legit military surplus SIG 320, and so it would be interesting.
I think Ian does too.
Yeah,
though Ian is not so much on the
video.
Yeah. The problem is with Mac, he just a week ago went out there, did an hour-long video saying how this is the greatest gun ever and none of this could ever happen. And yet we find this.
And also there's the thing of with the M17s and the M18s. I believe you said that the earliest example that you guys have doesn't display this issue, right?
Yes.
The earliest one, there is no lockback. And
Right.
actually, I've dropped in a few pictures for you to see. So the one with the black frame, that is the example of the earliest model. In the takedown, you can see the sear on top, the first image. That is the sear in the normal operating position. And then you have that little back plate filler on the 320s to fill where the 250 hammer used to go. You will see when that is taken down, the sear goes completely out of line and can no longer be seen at all. It drops below that plate, so there is no possible way the sear could ever catch that unless the sear is catching on the back plate.
Right.
Mhm.
But
So-
on this 2022 model with the voluntary upgrade changes, you see the two different sear positions, but you can clearly make out the sear is still above that back plate.
Yeah.
Right. So my point being with that is the M17s and M18s were obviously the Army put in their orders rather early on in life of this firearm. And
Actually, I think that was around the same time as the voluntary upgrade program. I
the
think all
the modifications for the voluntary upgrade was converting the commercial guns to the M17 spec. The M17 had an extra disconnector and an extra disconnector cut in the slide.
okay.
not the initial ones, because that's where the Tim and Ian's models came from with that extra cut. So SIG brought them back to do the extra cut in it, because that extra cut in the slide wasn't initially there, and thus why they got surplused.
If the original order for the M17 and M18 still had the original takedown lever, the military is rather infamous for no, we're not gonna go with any upgrades, whether it's a good idea or not, without going through a whole process. So it's a distinct chance that the M17s and M18s are
the M17 2017 is when it went into service, which is right around the same window as the voluntary upgrade changes.
Okay.
So we have a pistol of 2016 that has none of those changes. We have a pistol from 2017 that has all of those changes.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's right on that line, and we have been hearing supposedly the same thing is happening with the M17s and the M18s, which would make sense because even though they have a manual safety, that blocks the trigger bar, not the sear.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I was actually just talking with somebody in another group and talking about it's best to have the safety, and I'm like, I don't think the safety does anything for this malfunction.
No.
It does not block the sear at all, and does not force the sear into an upward position. Trust me, if I were to fix this, I'd say screw it, make the guns harder to reassemble, remove that lock cut, because I don't believe Heinrich has discussed it yet, but when you lock the gun open and it is in the takedown state, you have to, in reassembly, lift the slide stop to return the sear to the normal operating position.
The reassembly process that SIG instructs you to use is to have, when you put the slide back on, you have the takedown lever flipped down, and which will lock the takedown safety in the rearward and the slide or the sear down. Put the slide onto the gun and run it all the way back, and push up the slide stop lever and let the slide rest on that before you turn the takedown lever back up into the normal position. Raising the slide stop lever lifts the slide stop off of that peg on the takedown safety bar. that locks the takedown safety rearward when it's held by the slide stop lever. So if you lock the slide open after you've put your 320 back together, it lets that safety bar or the takedown safety bar snap back forward and your sear come back up into the fully raised position, which stops this series of malfunctions from happening.
Or supposed to. That is the specific failure we found.
Yes. It stops the chain of problems that we saw.
But the problem could be if you still have a normal 9mm takedown safety bar, a lot of these instances could be accounted for by the sear remaining in or near the takedown position. So if the sear remains in the takedown position, like what you have on the post-voluntary upgrade guns, like where we had it catch, if something about the gun being put back into state, even if you put it together properly, if it is remaining at that lowered position, you would still have that minimal contact, which could be accounting for what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that is a part under spring tension, so you are counting on springs to push it back up. Honestly, if I were SIG, I would be designing a new safety that says, screw the trigger bar, I am going to force that sear into the upright position so it can never let go of the striker when the safety's on.
I think that would be obvious.
Yeah, I don't know what the inside of their fire control group is, if they can do that.
Well, they made it simple, so all of the safety stuff is operating on the outside of the fire control unit on the right-hand side if you're looking at the rear of the gun. And it's just a bar protruding through.
Yeah.
So yes, you would be putting in a more complex part, but you would also prevent the sear from moving while the safety's on, which would appear to be a decent part of this issue.
So I think now would be a really good time to transfer. Like if you are somebody with a SIG 320, or I'll say right now, this weekend I'm heading back up to New Hampshire, and let me tell you, most of the cops up there are carrying 320s just because that's where they're made, and so that's they're supporting a local business, they're supporting a local employer, and yada yada. And so there's a ton of those in holsters, and of course also, being that I live in Massachusetts, the number of the handguns you can just buy, the SIG 320 is one of those. So I see a lot of 320s. And so what can, besides showing them your video, of which is probably the best thing to do, but also if somebody's listening in on the podcast that has a 320, what can you do to try to ensure that at least this error is not going to happen in your gun?
Honestly, what I would suggest is making sure your safeties are functional. So disassemble your handgun and then look at the rear of the slide. You will see the sear surface there. I'd pop up the slide stop in case you have one of the newer models to allow the sear to return to the upward position. Perform a takedown again with the takedown lever. Watch it drop, return it, and make sure that it pops back up to the normal position. That is checking that on the frame side of the gun, things are functional. The other half is you now have your slide separate. Look at the underside of the slide. You'll see the striker, and then off to the side of that, you'll see a piece of metal sticking up. You need to push down on that piece of metal and make sure it's springing up and down. That is going to ensure that your sear block safety is working. And it's easiest to do that by pushing down, which is going to be opposite of the direction of travel the springs are going to want to go in. Yeah. So if it's popping back up, the spring is working. Mm-hmm. And then you want to push forward on the striker and see if that goes forward at all. If it will have minimal movement. And then if you can, take a tool, push down the sear block, and then see if the striker goes further forward. If you have the same amount of travel with the lock disengaged and engaged positions, that would indicate your sear block safety is non-functional. But again, you get about another, what would you say, Heinrich, a quarter inch more of forward movement when the sear block is disengaged?
100 thou, or 100 thousandths of an inch. It's not a lot, but
It is
it's
noticeable.
it's everything when it's the last little bit of protrusion for the firing pin.
It's enough.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And
there's
it is something you can visually recognize.
Yeah,
the
it's-
difference between it.
when you're reaching in there with the tip of a pen and pushing on the striker, it is a noticeable difference if you push that striker block on the side of the striker in and push the striker forward. It's a noticeable amount that it can slide forward. And if you let go of the striker block and it springs back out nice and strong, and then you let the sear back and it won't push forward anymore, then you know that your striker block is still functioning properly.
And again, that's really just checking that the safeties are functional.
Yep.
If those safeties are functional, it doesn't matter if you have the bad transfer bar, provided you're always lifting up on the slide stop on reassembly.
If you,
Essentially, can this be done as a just make sure that you when as part of your function check, because everyone does you put the slide back on, you make sure it goes click when the after the striker's been cocked, but also you should lock the slide.
If you lock the gun open with the slide stop, that short circuits the problem with the takedown safety bar being locked backwards or being locked rearwards.
And you should be okay provided your sear is fully returning to the proper position. Again, the sear has multiple positions in this, which makes it utterly terrifying, because if it doesn't return to the proper position, you will not have proper sear engagement.
What can
I don't think
interfere with the
anyone's-
sear returning to the proper position?
Well,
What are some
I
things to
don't
look
think
out for?
anyone has recorded a sear not coming back up to the top, to the correct position when that's the takedown safety bar goes forward.
Except for the one where the springs got misaligned and interlocked in themselves. That one, I believe it was not actually returning to its proper position.
Was that one not coming back up? Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't fully coming back up. That's where the screwiness of all this gets in.
Well,
So again,
which spring?
there's a couple of springs underneath the sear assembly that are going to be pushing it back up. And apparently you can misassemble it and have the springs cross into each other and prevent
I think
roll
I read about
movement.
that.
Yeah, we shared that picture on the Handgun Radio episode we did.
Yeah, that was that high power CT scan image that had the springs crossed over.
Yep. Again, there are so many weirdnesses going in on this.
The reason it's been hard to track down is there's so many random things have to stack together for this to happen.
Well, that would also be indicative. So one thing I've also been seeing with the people that I've been sharing this with and just leading up to this is, the SIG 320, it's a piece of crap gun. To which I know, well, I mean, you could decide whether or not you believe it's a piece of crap gun, but you don't get as widely adopted as you do for being something that just, goes off at random moments and all of that. And while there have been a shocking number of cases where this gun has gone off and there have been injuries because of this gun going off when it wasn't supposed to, the number that is out there, I think you said there's 4 million.
According to SIG, it is 3 million plus.
Yeah.
So somewhere north of 3 million.
I thought it
And
was like 3.5 million or something like that.
yeah. We really didn't go fully into what the failure was that we found, because
I'm honestly not concerned about any of mine anymore. I've gone into them deep enough and I know the things to inspect to where I'm satisfied again that these are safe to run.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I would say anything after the voluntary upgrade, I'd be a little more cautious with, but we should probably go in and say, even with the point where we got it, so we had minimal sear contact, and it was with more than one slide when we had the 10mm frame, a 10mm fire control group and a 9mm frame with a 9mm slide. doing a standard function check of the gun in the takedown position with minimal sear engagement, the function check worked almost perfectly. There was 1 or 2 times in there where I actually heard it slip off. But if you're not paying attention, it will function check like it's working properly. And vice versa for the 9 and a 10 frame, other than you can never insert an actual magazine into the gun.
That video
no matter what
you shared earlier where you worked the slide and it went off as you were touching the slide.
Yep.
Just gave me chills. Weak in the knees kind of chills.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that...
But again, in order for it to actually go off, you have to have all of these safeties fail. So for us, the guns we had multiple slides where we actually had it with the 10 millimeter frame. If with the 10 millimeter fire control group and a 9 millimeter frame, we had at least 2, if not 3 separate slides be able to get minimal sear engagement and slip off. The tolerances were just right where we had it on more than one slide.
Yeah.
And that was a 2022 production model.
Yeah.
In a vast majority of the video, I am using a 2022 production slide with the 2022 production 10 millimeter fire control unit. What's terrifying is in the takedown position, I was able to go to the range and fire the gun. And every other round, it would fire and behave normally. And then the second shot would be a dead trigger. One time in a 21 round mag, it actually did a double fire. So it comes in recoil, the slide comes home, and as soon as the slide comes home, it just drops off another round. So it can still function and look perfectly fine when it's in this bad condition. You operate the slide stop, and the gun will work perfectly fine, perfectly normal. You will have no clue that this could even occur.
Yeah. Well, one thing, when we were early rounds of testing, once we got the sear to shake and release, or we got the striker to shake and release from the sear, while we had a functioning striker block safety in the slide, the gun would not go off. So you need to have a non-functional striker block safety at the same time as the problem, or the sear being locked in the takedown position.
Yeah.
So
and even with
two failures at the same time for this to happen.
Technically, I think it'd probably be closer to 3 if you were talking SIGs, because you should never be able to load a magazine into the gun.
Yeah.
But what's coming on top of all that is, even with the striker block installed, the tolerances we had were close enough to good that whenever you loaded a round into the chamber, you would not be able to get it to slip off ever. So it was probably not engaging at all. But you can't see in there to tell one way or the other. And when we finally got around to defeating the striker block safety, just so, okay, let's say this has failed and we're going to test it, I would say we probably did 50 to 100 renditions before we had it finally actuate, slip off, and fire the round.
I was ready to give up before we got that last round to slip off and go and discharge, because we'd been out there for most of an hour.
Yeah. And again, this is the weirdness of it. So even with everything wrong, all the safety is disconnected, it's just the right combination of events can make it discharge. But again, it's incredibly rare to get this kind of confluence. I would say
but that also, again, that lines up with the numbers that we're seeing. Again, there are millions of them out there. A lot of them are duty use guns. They're not all there. There's a few safe queens, but there's a lot of guns that are hard use. But meanwhile, the only thing we're seeing is this really handful of incidences, and maybe not all of them are actually the SIG malfunctioning. It could be operator error. So
There's always possibility of operating.
Yeah, so it's this is kind of that the billions of monkeys all banging on billions of keyboards. One of them is going to crank out the complete works of William Shakespeare.
Exactly so.
Mm-hmm. We just happen to have the right combination of guns for this to happen, because other people will take the same setups we have. So they'll take a 10 millimeter 45 transfer safety bar, put it in their frame, and it's only allowing the magazine to be installed, but they're not getting sear engagement, or they're getting enough sear engagement, it's not falling off. And yeah, it's one of those, just, it's very weird. And if you look at the sear stop on the brown, so if you look at the sear surface, there is parts of that sear surface that may not be engaging at all. So the question is it where the surface is clean or dirty that we're having sear engagement? That's a terrifying question to ask, because if it's where it's dirty, you have a 2/3 engagement. If it's clean, you have a 1/3 engagement of the sear, even in the proper position. So again, it is the right combination of parts that go together, and for a gun that you mix and match, that's terrifying. But
you're really supposed to mix and match, at least how it's marketed in the US.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. And when you mix and match and you have this tolerance, honestly, I think really what we can say about that Genghis Khan video, the guy in California who was shooting a competition and it went off in the holster, I believe that one is actually what's happening. SIG said that there was a weak or broken spring, and they said the firing pin return spring. I'm wondering if instead it was the striker block spring was either weak, broken, or missing, and he had maybe just reassembled the gun, taking it from his carry frame to his competition frame. So let's say he had a tungsten frame for competition. So he swaps out from his shorter, smaller carry one to a full size for competition, and he just brings the slide back and flips the takedown lever, lets it go home, and then goes out, loads it up, never hitting the slide stop, holsters it up, and let's say it's a forward cant holster. Gravity would pull that striker block forward if there's no spring tension on it. If it's forward canted, that weight could pull it into the unlocked position. And minimal sear engagement combined with that, you could have a holster pop with just minimal jostling.
Like walking on uneven ground.
Walking on uneven ground, shaking it a little bit, a little twist on the slide, a little pull up on the slide, any of that will do it. If you're in the
settling your
worst
belt
condition.
before this brown.
I really want to say that there was an episode of the podcast within like the past year that we covered where there was an Army military police officer, decorated veteran. He knew what he was doing. And it was like his holster bumped something or someone else in the hallway, and it discharged.
Yep.
I remember
that was actually why I asked about if you knew about the M17, because this is a little bit of gun geekery here, but the when the Army adopted the M17. And we did a show on it in Handgun Radio, so we were geeking out about the features. And I noted that while the Army, the militaries in general, like pretty much exclusively use 9mm guns, there are still like special forces units and all of that have various guns, whether they be 1911s, but either old vintage ones or the more modern M45. Or I don't know if there's any P320s that are being used, but probably. But also HK USP 45 tacticals. That's one of the things often stated is the SOCOM uses the Mark 23, and certain people have stepped up and said, no, we just use USB tacticals. They're not as big. But there have been times for people that want to use a suppressed 45 as a sidearm, and so I was wondering if SIG initially produced these with the more universal 45 or large frame block, because it could be easily swapped out by an armorer if they desired a 45 caliber gun.
It's always possible. Supposedly, somebody that was looking at that had said, "Hey, I could have sworn I remembered them saying, yeah, you can just swap out the 10 millimeter and use it in all of them." Which, based on what we're seeing, is mechanically yes.
Yeah,
You just have one fewer safety that works in doing so.
Yeah, the 10 millimeter takedown safety bar functions just fine in the 9, except for no longer doing the magazine block safety.
And not doing the magazine block safety means it can still operate in the takedown position of the sear, which is dangerous.
Yeah, you can reassemble it incorrectly.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah.
We did an episode of Handgun Radio talking about unsafe safeties.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I mentioned, and it's been completely memory hold from the internet, was the first gen Desert Eagle. Ambidextrous safety with the levers attached to either end and a cylindrical drum in the middle. And it could be assembled incorrectly so that when the safety lever was on safe, it was ready to fire and vice versa.
Ooh.
Still don't think that's as dangerous as what you guys just described.
Honestly, what I find more dangerous is the amount of people that I see going, "Oh, what you're showing doesn't matter because you modified the gun to make it fail." It's like, yes and no. I'm scared of all these people trying to defend SIG. It's like,
you're not
guys.
SIG.
Well, and
we're trying to show the failure mode no one else has been able to replicate, and we managed to stumble upon the, oh crap, this is how you can replicate at least what is being claimed to have happened.
Yeah, and one of the things that can cause a real world example of what you guys modified that without any work on the user is if that spring fails, and those little springs, if you don't think one of those little springs can fail or will fail, sorry.
If you want a more terrifying thought, think about it this way. When you're actually, say, aiming the gun at something, you're going to mostly be having that safety is going to be pulled down into the safe position. But if you put it in a forward canted holster, if there is nothing acting upon it, gravity is going to want to pull it into the unlocked position in a holster, but only in a forward canted holster.
Yeah. Well, it's a
or actually if you are in a forward position. So actually that's a
correct.
Again, the officers. Well, I'm trying
getting out of the car.
Yeah, the guy getting out of the car. Absolutely, the gun was canted forward, and I'm trying to remember about the officer that had gotten into the tussle. I feel like he was also kind of leaning down.
Yeah. The guy was on the floor and he was leaning over him at the very end of that tussle, and then he stood up, took a step or two, and bang.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and from looking at it, it's a properly designed spring, but it would be very easy to miss it on reassembling this thing. Because it's tiny, and it kind of wants to jump out of there if you're not careful while you're getting that striker assembly back into the slide. So that spring not being there isn't the hardest thing to imagine.
Yeah. Well, and the size of that spring reminds me greatly of the size of and it's a different style of spring. The Omega spring in Benchmade Axis locks. The spring that actually pushes the safety bar or the lock bar on Benchmade's Axis lock knives. And 999 times out of 1,000, that locking mechanism works for the customer for as long as they have their knives. But it is that little itty bitty spring is known to fail.
Oh yeah. The smaller and thinner the spring, the fewer cycles it has before it weakens to the point of needing to be replaced.
And thus why the whole "it ends today" thing was absolutely insane to say.
Oh, that's really the thing that has bothered me, has quite possibly bothered me the most of this whole ordeal, is SIG's response to it with the whole "this ends today." It's not a problem. This just doesn't happen, and it's only and the people that say that it is happening are anti-gun shills.
Yeah, that's why we want the Hughes Amendment removed.
Yeah, well, that amongst other things, yeah.
Hate to tell
I watched the video once. I do need to watch it again because I feel like I missed pieces because I was a little distracted. But at no point did you bash SIG. You were very respectful of the company, I thought.
Yeah.
He gave them a lot of outs. One of the things that I remember was when he said, okay, this is like a 1 in a million chance of happening, but there are 3 million plus guns out there, so that's at least 3 of these uncommanded discharges. So yeah, you went out of your way to be fair and impartial,
which is really, really important, and I applaud your doing that.
Honestly, I just hope that SIG honestly is willing to recognize that, because really all I want is this issue to be resolved and them to actually accept there is an issue so we can figure out what it is. Though, absolutely. I will say they need to start disclosing all of these rolling changes they have made. Every single one of these changes, because I think it's some weird combination of, well, this got this change and this got that change, combining together, because we have a fractal increase of the number of possible failure scenarios because of all the rolling changes, and no one knows what or when they are. We know for sure there was a change for the voluntary upgrade around 2017, and then there was a tweak done after that separate to change the dirt ingress because of experiences the military had with the M17. And I suspect that's why in the trigger group on the 2022 models we have, there is a greater area cutaway at the rear of the slide off to the left of the sear. But again, none of this is actually documented or in the public, so no one really knows what the hell to expect. Oh, you know what? Also, in the 2022 model, they lengthened the ejector from the 2017 variant.
Were they having failure to eject?
I'm not sure.
I don't remember hearing anything about that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the pictures here. I'm like, wait, no, that is noticeably a different shape of the two on the left side of the photo. Which again, this is terrifying that we have all of these changes and
no documentation.
SIG and SIG proprietary people are the only ones that have this documentation. We don't know what acceptable tolerances are. So really, we should have all of this information if we want to be able to safely know, okay, what are we going to check? And of course, they're going to go, oh no, send the gun to us. Our armorers will check it. That becomes prohibitively insane for everyone.
So this is a question that I'm throwing out rhetorically because I know you don't know it, but I wonder what are the chances, given SIG's repeated denials, that they will try and get YouTube to take the video down. I mean, if they do, it's going to look incredibly shady, but
I mean,
they've made these mistakes before. What's going to stop them from making another one?
Well, honestly, because this is a variant of the U.S. military's handgun, and we do have the military going, an officer saying, hey, my gun went off uncommanded. It's one of those, hey, maybe we need to start talking to a couple of Congress people and maybe get a congressional board going or something.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're going to try and sweep this under the rug, this is one of those where it's like, you know what? Congress is ineffective, but they are very good at publicity, and this needs the greatest publicity possible. That's why we didn't just go to...
They want to protect their phony baloney jobs.
Yeah, not to mention, oh, guess what? SIG is not in our district or anywhere near our district. So our Congress people aren't exactly on the board of who they want to bribe first.
Right, but the New Hampshire reps and senators, might start getting a lot of heat, that they are endangering not just their constituents, but police officers and military by not addressing this.
Again, there is a reason we didn't just go straight to SIG when we found this issue, because A, they're in denial. It's very obvious from everything they're doing. They're in denial. They plan on denying it. They plan on continuing to deny it. So our best bet is to publicize it as widely as possible and get the information out there to everyone we possibly can, because everyone's been saying, SIG keeps saying, that can't happen, that can't happen. And somehow, in a large portion of the cases, they are getting the experts for the... They're getting the opponent's experts tossed out as invalid for some weird reasons.
Well, if their lawyers can convince the judge that the other experts are not expert enough, the judge can just kick him out on a judgment call, or on a
exactly
just say that they don't believe them and not allow them in.
There is a reason why we are showing video of, yes, this failure mode can happen.
Yeah.
It's not saying that is the failure mode that is happening all the time. It's probably not. This is probably a way more weird failure mode, but it is indicative that it is
possible.
But again, that's why I'm dedicating so much. I mean, this is a variety show. It's a little bit for everyone, but really, we're just talking about the SIG 320 right now, because it is such a widely adopted gun. I mean, it's the U.S. military sidearm. It's in so many
police agencies. Yeah,
such a big. There's a lot of people that use that as their personal gun. I mean, it's a huge competition gun with the the heavier frames and the gray guns triggers and all of that stuff.
I've run a whole lot of competitions and like 200 some hours of training with a 320.
Yeah, and again, we've had so many videos out of either showing guns going off in dubious circumstances, or just bad circumstances, and then also having the people speculating on, all right, here's this, the X-ray of the sear springs interlocking. We have the various videos saying, oh, here's this part and that part, and this could potentially be the reason, and that could be the potentially, but we've never actually seen we talked to SIG people at NRAM, and they said, no, we've got like test rigs in the factory where we're dropping guns and jiggling guns and doing things to try to make it go off, and we haven't been able to recreate that. Maybe maybe that's true. Maybe they're lying and they're concealing it. Maybe also there's a couple of people concealing it and everybody else is just telling what they think is the truth.
Well, but I would expect everyone at SIG to be putting the gun back together the way the SIG tells you to, which stops this from happening.
Yeah, I mean,
this is the reason why. This is the reason why video games have alpha testers. Is just we've run the video game and all of that. All right, now let's have just the person who's obsessed with crouch running to do the game, and we never thought you'd be running while crouched, and that breaks the game.
I mean,
or bunny hopping.
In SIG's defense, not that they really need defending, but I can see the mindset of, okay, we're going to take a modern gun and we're going to assemble it properly, and it never would occur to them to put in an incorrect trigger group or to use old parts, because
or just not do the full proper assembly. So let's say you go through and you're assuming you're going to have the correct trigger group no matter what, and then you're going to use the slide stop no matter what, because you're going to follow the manual exactly.
It's easier to flip that lever down if you lock the slide back. So they would always do that. It's not hard to see where they would not ever do put the slide on and slightly awkwardly hold it back while you flip the lever down and skip the step of pushing up the slide stop lever.
Yeah, or they wouldn't think to just, hey, I'm going to have my hand covering the ejection port when I'm unloading a round, so it just falls into my hand. They would never consider doing that. I see people do that on the range all the time because they're like, I want to save my ammo. Ammo is expensive. It's a very bad idea to do that, but people do it all the time.
Well, and to further that point, for folks that think that, well, they should cover all their bases, there's been a bunch of companies that have gotten caught with their pants down for not having. The biggest one that comes to mind is, I forget which generation iPhone, where if you held it wrong, it would disconnect.
Oh.
4th gen, the antenna was the exterior of the phone, and you would physically be able to touch it.
Yeah, you could short the antenna dipole.
And it would drop the call.
Yep.
Yeah.
4th gen iPhones. Fun times.
Yeah, everyone who was testing knew not to touch it there.
Yeah, and if folks don't remember that, Steve Jobs, like a petulant child on the stage.
You already said Steve Jobs. You need to repeat.
Well, yeah. Well, there's not actually anything wrong, but since it's happening all the time, we're going to give everybody that has bought the 4th gen iPhone, we'll give them the bumpers that just a little plastic thing that slips over the edge of that wraps around the edge of your phone, and ta-da, you're no longer touching the antenna.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember that.
But I'm pretty sure what happened was all the testers, being techie geeks, were probably always making calls using Bluetooth headsets.
I can see that.
Yeah. Or just knew that you don't put your finger there because you'll short out the antenna.
Yeah.
Again, if you're designing it, you're thinking about this is how it works. You don't think about it of how can I get a little more efficient? And honestly, I could see them having an armorer just not think about it, and maybe it wasn't emphasized. This is essential that you use the slide stop, going, hey, I can save a second because I can one-hand the gun, hold the slide open, flip the lever, and I've got to do 50 of these today. I'll save myself a half a second.
Especially if it's the tug the slide back, and they're used to working on things like Glocks, where that's the proper method anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
This is like the meme of the dungeon master supplying a dungeon for their players, and it's a loaf of bread, a piece of ham, and a block of cheese, and you see the loaf of bread with the cheese and ham, the players, the loaf of bread with the cheese and ham on top of it.
Yeah, and again, people are weird like that, but people also don't listen. I can promise you people don't listen, because I remember a couple of years ago, I had an employee call me and ask, how do I take down a Glock in his off time? I went through a 2-minute spiel saying, make sure it's unloaded, make sure it's unloaded, make sure it's unloaded. People accidentally shoot themselves when disassembling this gun all the time. I go over that and then tell them how to take it down, repeat one more time, make sure it's unloaded before you do this. 5 minutes later, I get a call when he's on the way to the hospital because he shot himself. They don't listen.
Was he okay?
Yeah, he just got a few stitches in his hand, but again, he gave himself Glock hand after being repeatedly warned beforehand, because that's the user. The end user has selective attention.
Or ask anybody who's worked in IT ever how they feel about users.
Saying the end user has selective attention.
Or, and actually, I'll say this specific for David. Anybody that walks into a gun store and is unholstering a gun, who says, "Don't worry, it's not loaded."
Doesn't matter whether they're unholstering; they bring it in a case.
Yeah,
Don't worry, it's not loaded. Nope.
Yeah, I've heard a story of a gun shop that has a big glass jar on the counter, and it's filled with just random bullets because
a gun shop.
It's probably multiples, but
I was going to say that's most gun shops.
But like, I know that every gun shop in existence has handled an unloaded gun that absolutely positively wasn't. I have been handed a gun. It's actually my Colt vest pocket. The first time I ever handled my Colt vest pocket, it was handed to me as an unloaded gun, and I did the correct thing and do this every damn time because let me tell you, somebody could have gotten hurt. Not badly because this is 25. But
if they noticed, they would have been upset.
Yeah, exactly. But I decided to clear the gun before I handled it any further and opened the action, and out popped interestingly enough, it was a Glazer blue tip 25 ACP. I don't even know what that would do to anything, but still, I'm glad we didn't figure out that day, because oh gosh, I thought it was unloaded. Yeah, you thought it was unloaded, but it sure wasn't. And the end users can do a lot of scary things.
Yeah, I think I told the story here about a friend showing me a vintage Marlin Model 60, and he pulled the magazine tube, dumped the rounds, racked the action a few times, and then handed it to me. And the first thing I did was pull back the bolt, look down inside, and then show him that there was still a round in the gun.
Yeah.
Because it was on the lifter, but without the spring pressure of the magazine tube, it wouldn't get pushed back far enough. If he had just put the empty magazine tube back in, racked the action, and pulled the trigger, that gun would have fired. It's not enough to just take out the magazine and rack the slide. You have to look.
Yeah.
And
you have to understand how the gun functions. Because when you get into some weird stuff.
Yeah, just at least to a basic degree. I mean, that's the whole reason behind Israeli carry, as we've talked about.
And also there's the angle of tolerance stacking. You mentioned about the sear drops down as so that it can clear when the slide is going through, but it's one of those like, well, the sear is going to drop down between this level and that level, and the striker is going to drop down below the slide to that level or this level, and there's going to be a min and max, and if you're minimized on one and maximized on the other, well, they actually may interact when they absolutely shouldn't.
Yep.
And I do
actually technically you have three surfaces, because you have the sear surface on the top and the bottom. Then you have the internal surfaces on the takedown safety lever. And then you have the striker surface, how long the striker comes down. And then you have the entire body around the striker. And then the hole in the slide. What's the tolerance on that? That's where it's getting into the, oh God, there's way too many tolerances to know what is and is not going to be safe in this.
Yep.
And I wanted to point out, while we've all definitely dealt with people with firearms that we've questioned their IQ levels, you don't have to be stupid to have had those scares. I think we've all had it where we were pretty darn sure that was an unloaded gun.
Think.
Oh.
I mean, I had one instance at the gun club where I was showing someone had never seen a 1911. I was showing them how the grip, they weren't sure about the grip safety. I was showing them how the grip safety worked, and I had dropped the magazine, but I had not cleared the gun. So when I showed them how you can, when you push all the safeties down and all of that and pull the trigger, the hammer dropped, and the hammer dropped on a live round, and a live round went downrange into the berm because it was still pointed in a safe direction. But I was talking about a lot of stuff. I got distracted. I skipped a step.
And that's why we have the 4 rules. If you break one of them, chances are everybody's still fine. It's when you break a couple of them that you start having problems.
Yep. But that's the scary thing about this malfunction is that a holstered gun does not apply to the four
Right.
rules. I mean, there was
yeah.
a great line of Jay Grazio and I were shooting at my club, and it happened to be a hot, humid night, and so I took my cover shirt off, and here I was shooting a Chris Vector or my FAL, and Jay's standing behind me taking pictures, and realizes that the flash of his camera is illuminated, is glinting off of the copper hollow point of the round chambered in my 1911, and he was just like, "Oh, that just geeked me out so bad." And I'm like, "Yeah, but it's in a holster. It's a thumb brake holster, so the thumb brake is over between the firing pin and the hammer. Like, it's crazy safe." He's like, "I know it's crazy safe, but I don't like standing with the muzzle pointed at me." And I totally get it. I totally get it. And all that. And doubly so with in this case, like, yeah, when you hop out of a car, maybe your leg is in front of the muzzle of your holstered pistol, but we don't train that, because when the gun is in the holster, it should be perfectly safe, and therefore
the holster is the external safety.
Yeah, and that's where you get all of the, you index your hand on your sternum, you index your hand on your shoulder. There's all sorts of, when I do my cross draw from my shoulder holster, my left hand is on my right shoulder whenever I'm drawing, because that will make sure that my arm will never be in the way of the gun as it sweeps out from the holster and in there. And so we learn to do it when we clear the holster, but we don't think about it all the time, because we shouldn't have to. And that's what makes this scary, and what makes this video so important is if you have a SIG 320, you don't have to quit, because it might be your only gun. This might be your first gun. You're not in a position to just sell it. And especially if the market gets glutted with people dumping them. Well, great. Congratulations. You paid, $500 for this gun new, and now they're going to offer you $150 for it because nobody wants one.
And I want to reiterate, when it was reassembled improperly, the gun could fire. And what you don't see in the video is the multiple times where I would set this thing up and then try and put it in the holster, and just the act of putting the gun into the holster would make the sear drop.
Oh.
It was like,
sorry.
It's one of those where sometimes I've seen footage of a 320 where somebody's holstering it and it pops and everyone's like, "Oh, it's like the Glock, something got in there." But in my experience with this, when you have improper sear engagement, it can shake off just by holstering it in a good, solid, reputable holster without anything being in there.
Yeah, which is why we have the phrase "fail safe." Something should fail to a safe state.
Right. Though again, we talk about also in the firearms industry the importance of failing unsafe as well, because the last thing you want, there's a debate whether fail safe or fail unsafe is, do you want the gun to come out of the holster and not work because a part malfunctioned, or do you want the safety feature to, or do you want the safety feature to keep it working at all times?
Yeah,
you never know.
Oddball, I heard your voice, but you sounded very faint. Did something change with your setup?
No,
he sounds fine.
Okay, just might have been the other voices were just louder. I don't know.
No.
The voices in your head, David.
I don't have voices in my head. I have cicadas.
Yeah. Well, we've been going on for a while. I had a few other news stories up there, but I think we can probably kick those on until next episode, unless there's any urgent statements.
No, but hopefully by the time this posts, everyone should know whether or not the Hearing Protection Act and Short Act got included in the budget reconciliation bill.
Yeah.
I have heard that the Hearing Protection Act is back in, but the Short Act they're still fighting. But I don't know. I just heard bits and pieces.
And even at that, what I'm hearing is it's very much I'm told it's in there, but I'm even seeing videos of Congress people going, "So what's actually in this?" And it's like, oh, Yay. But the actual voting is supposed to happen at 1 a.m. on Wednesday morning Eastern time. So,
Right.
Yeah.
And I have been, every time I see somebody on the right, a politician or party, posting it on social media about the quote-unquote big beautiful bill, I add the following comment. The so-called big beautiful bill needs to include the complete hearing protection and short acts, removing suppressors, SBRs, and SBSs from the NFA once and for all. I've done this like 30 or 40 times.
Mm-hmm.
And
yep.
I've sent the emails, I've done the online petition stuff, and I don't know if it's actually going to have any effect, but I try.
Yeah, I've called all my reps. I know I have at least one who is a co-sponsor of the Short Act on the Senate side. Unfortunately, my Congress critter is on the Ways and Means Committee and was very much for only doing the removal of the $200 tax for a transfer.
Yeah, set the tax to 0.
Yep. And after probably 4 or 5 calls and getting brushed off every single time, it's like, okay, I can keep harassing him, but he's not going to listen. I guess it's got to prepare for the primaries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll call that a night. Again, check the show notes. We've got the stuff. I'm gonna throw some of the pictures that we're looking at right here into the show notes as well, and go watch the video. Go share the video. This is not just a, hey, these guys are my friends and they're good people in the 2A community. This is one of those, like, this could save lives. This will help you check your gun to try to make sure that it is as safe as possible. And this is something that you can show other people. Like, literally, if your town uses 320s as their police holsters, like, go talk to somebody. Go talk to go see if you can find the armorer. Go up to the desk and say, hey, who's in charge of the of your range qualifications and things like that? Who's in charge of your guns and all that? This is kind of important. And hand off the information, because again, this can save lives. So yeah, let's thank everybody. So obviously we've got the very special guests. We have Matt.
Thanks all for having us.
And Heinrich.
Yep, thanks for having us here.
And thank you guys for all the hard work you put into this. This is phenomenal.
That was that was David. We have Oddball.
Yes, I'm very grateful for you guys spending a very long weekend putting this video together.
And probably the least gun nerdy person when it comes to talking about minutia parts is Aaron Paulette. You've been very patient.
Mm-hmm.
and I'm Weer'd, and now is the time that we thank our listeners, each and every one of them. But we also give a very special thanks to our supporters on Patreon. To become a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers Podcast and sign up. You can get early release of the podcast. Plus, we've got the blooper reels, we've got the ACB film tracks, and we've got the ACB Magnum.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts and Pocket Casts. Subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
Yep, and I've got my blog. That's weerdworld.com. That's weerdworld.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And I'll speak for
Weer'd.
for Matt.
Weird.
Yes.
I didn't get an E out of you.
Oh, you didn't.
I didn't get an E out of that guy.
You watch your ass, buddy.
Admonish. What's even better is I'm going to keep this in. Yeah, and I'll speak for Matt and Heinrich that you can find them at LFD Research and the Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns podcast. Both will be linked in the show notes. Oddball, where can people find you?
I have a blog at gunscarstech.com, and you can find me here and regularly on Handgun Radio.
And David?
I'm here. I Handgun Radio when I can. Contributor to Blue Collar Prepping at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. I'm on the Facebook pages for ACP and Handgun Radio, and I'm a published author with stories in books under Brenna Bach and David Bach.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
Some SIG P320s malfunction, and some don't. The failure rate is assorted, and so is our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.